Tonight, I just want to spend a little time asking that question. Who is Jesus? And I want to invite you to ask that question as well. Who is Jesus to you? Who is Jesus in your life? Now, we can learn a lot about Jesus from the Gospels, right? There's a lot in the Gospels that talks about, especially the birth of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all talk about the birth of Jesus. Now, have you ever heard a story from four different people, right, who all saw the same thing, but they all kind of saw a different piece of it, or something mattered more to one than the other? This is kind of what happens in the Gospels. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell us a little bit about their perspective on the birth of Jesus. And in the book of Matthew, we get to kind of hear from Mary's perspective on the birth of Jesus. It's Mary's genealogy that's in Matthew, and we hear about the challenge of Joseph and Mary dealing with this unplanned pregnancy. We hear about the wise men or the magi, and we hear about Mary pondering all of these things in her heart. We get to hear about the escape from Egypt when Herod put a hit out on Jesus, and so they ran out of town in the middle of the night, becoming refugees in a foreign country, hoping someone would give them some grace. In Mark, we hear the story of Jesus, but Mark's in too much of a hurry to deal with the birth narrative. Mark wants to get to the resurrection. That's his big deal. And so the first time we hear of Jesus in the book of Mark is at his own baptism, when John the Baptist baptizes him. But in Luke, we hear this perspective kind of from Joseph's perspective. We get the most details about Jesus' birth in the book of Luke. We hear about Joseph's genealogy, angels who show up to Mary and to Elizabeth, and these miraculous births even before Jesus's, in the birth of John the Baptist. We hear about a census that is taken and a trip that Joseph and Mary have to take in their 9th month of pregnancy and finding no room to stay in Bethlehem. And we hear about the very first people that get to hear the announcement, the shepherds. And we hear about Simeon and Anna, who are in the temple on the 8th day after Jesus is born, when Jesus is presented, and these two who have been waiting their whole lives to see the Messiah come to the recognition that this is God's anointed. But in the book of John, we hear a very different version of the birth story. It's as if John's saying, okay, you've heard all the stories. Now I want to tell you about the man. It's as if John is saying, about Jesus. I want to introduce you to Jesus. You know the how, but I want you to know the who. And so in John chapter 1, we hear things like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning. And he was the light of the world, it says. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. I love the Message version of this. It said, the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. You know, that's just a great picture. Imagine Jesus is your neighbor. I bet you cut your grass more. I'm just saying. So we get this really interesting picture of Jesus from John, the person of Jesus. And what John believes is you cannot fully know God unless you know Jesus. Not just about Jesus, not just cognitively, but connected relationship. Do you know Jesus? And so with that in mind, I want to say the most important thing you'll hear all night, coming out of my mouth anyway. And kids, this is for you. So all the kids in the room, let me raise your hand, wave at me if you're a kid in the room. All right, good. I see you. By the way, can I just tell you how glad I am that you guys are here? It wouldn't be Christmas without you guys. So thanks for being here. But listen to this. Here's the most important thing I'll say tonight. I believe in Santa because Santa believes in Jesus. Oh, let me say that again. I'm already watching some of you parents like, ooh, where's he going with this? Right? Right? I believe in Santa because Santa believes in Jesus. Now, let me tell you what I mean when I say that. Many of you kind of know the story behind Santa and the history of where Santa came from. In around 300 AD, there was a Catholic bishop known as Saint Nicholas, right? And Saint Nicholas was known for going around and giving gifts to families that were in need. He would drop gold coins in the shoes that were outside of people's front doors to help families so that when they woke up, there were these gifts there for them. There's one story that says St. Nicholas took some coins and he threw them through a window because there was no shoes out front, and they landed in some socks that were hanging by the fireplace to dry. And here we are 2,000 years later hanging socks with gifts by the fireplace. Now, most of you have heard that story, but let me tell you the story you may not have heard. Around 325 AD, around the time the Bible was being put together, people were kind of coming to understand the fullness of Christianity. There was an emperor named Constantine, and he was a new emperor. He was a new convert to Christianity, and what he did was he called 300 pastors, bishops, priests, and church leaders all together in what was known as the Council of Nicaea. All right? So at this Council of Nicaea, 300 church leaders got together, and their job was to ask the question, who is Jesus? Is he a miracle worker? Is he a prophet? Is he a preacher? Is he a revolutionary? Is he a heretic? Is he the Son of God? And if so, what does that even mean? So they all kind of came and they said, listen, we've all heard the stories, but who is Jesus really to us? St. Nicholas was one of those bishops that got invited to this meeting. Now, surprise, surprise, you get 300 church folks in one room together. That's about where we are tonight. There's bound to be trouble, all right? And this was no exception. The Council of Nicaea, they were trying to ask this difficult question, and an argument broke out. Kids, you've never argued with a brother or sister, have you? You guys never argue, do you? No, you're so nice. Oh, I can't believe it. Parents, that's not true, is it? Well, surprise, surprise, there was an argument that broke out. An argument between two priests, one named Athanasius, he's on the left, and one named Arius, he's on the right. And Athanasius said that Jesus was fully God and fully human, that there was no separation between Jesus and God. Jesus is God, and God is Jesus. That was what he said, and he used John 1 as his proof. Now, Arius, on the other hand, he said, Jesus is a pretty good guy, but he's not quite up to the level of God. Jesus, he said, was created by God. So he's a little lower than God. He's higher than people and higher than angels, but not quite God. And so there was this argument that broke out. And this argument got a little heated. You ever have one of those friendly arguments that you got a little hot and steamy in your house? Don't worry, you got family coming over this week. You'll get it. I'm quite sure. So this argument raged on for about 3 days. And have you ever been in a room where someone was just saying stuff that just got on your last nerve? You ever been there and they just wouldn't shut up, and they just wouldn't stop, and they just wouldn't let it go, and they just wouldn't quit? This was what was happening in this council, and St. Nicholas is listening to Arius say that Jesus is less than God. And for St. Nicholas, this was really dangerous. It was unbiblical. It was wrong. And thirdly, it was dangerous. Because what St. Nicholas believed was that the way we understand Jesus is the way we understand God. And if we get Jesus wrong, we're going to miss God altogether. History tells us, this is not Dave, but history tells us that on the third day, St. Nicholas had enough. And he got up, walked across the room, and punched Arius in the face. Gives a whole new picture to Santa Claus, doesn't it, y'all? That whole sees you when you're sleeping, knows if you've been naughty or nice, right? Be good for goodness sake, right? And so St. Nicholas, you're not supposed to punch people in church. Does everybody know that, right? I mean, we don't have a sign on the front door, but you all know you're not supposed to punch people in church. So they arrest St. Nicholas and they throw him in jail, and they take from him his bishop's clothes, his garments that made him a priest, and they take his New Testament from him. And if that were the end of the story, we'd never know anything about St. Nicholas. The good news is that that wasn't the end of the story. The story goes on to say that that night, St. Nicholas was in jail, and he had a vision of Jesus and Mary coming to visit him. And in his vision, St. Nicholas hears Jesus say, "St. Nicholas, why are you here?" And listen to Nicholas's response. "Why are you here?" Jesus asked. He said, "Because I love you, my Lord and my God." I struggle a little with that turn the other cheek thing, but I love you, my Lord and my God. And so the next morning, history tells us that the guards walked in, and there's Nicholas with the prison doors wide open, chains laying on the floor. He's wearing his bishop's robes, and he is reading his New Testament. And when he was asked, "Where did you get these things? We took them away from you," he said, "Jesus gave them to me." Emperor Constantine heard about this story and immediately saw this as a sign from God. He restored St. Nicholas to a full bishop. He recognized that his understanding of Jesus was the right one. He declared Arius a heretic, sent him outside the church, and St. Nicholas was restored by Emperor Constantine. Now, the rest of that meeting, that church meeting, is where they wrote what we read earlier, the Nicene Creed, and how it describes who Jesus is, begotten, not created, right? All of that language about who Jesus is. So I want to go back to my original statement just for a minute. And kids, this is for you again. I believe in Santa because Santa believes in Jesus. And listen, this is really important. Not just the story of Jesus, not just the idea of Jesus, not just the tradition or the nostalgia or the even just the teachings of Jesus, but St. Nicholas believed in the one true Jesus, the Savior of the world that was truly God and truly human, who lived with us and for us and through us. St. Nicholas believed in a Jesus who came to show us a better way to live. He believed in a Jesus who was the true light of the world, who demonstrated what love and giving and sacrifice really looked like. And he believed in a Jesus who not only came as a baby, but is coming again to bring us to be with him. And it's this Jesus that saves us. It's that Jesus that saves us. A young preacher once asked Mother Teresa for some advice. And here's the advice she gave him. She said, "Get to know Jesus, the real Jesus, the true Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, and not just the Jesus of your imagination." Friends, the greatest gift I can imagine any of you getting or giving this Christmas is an opportunity for you to take one step closer to the real Jesus every day. An opportunity for you to fall deeper in love with Jesus. Not just the stories or the idea of Jesus, but the real Jesus in your life. And I don't know a better place to do that than being surrounded by other Jesus folk who are trying to figure it out. Not perfect people, because perfect people don't get to come to this church. Yeah, we send them down the road to somebody else's church. We're here, we are broke folk looking for healing and hope, and we recognize that we need Jesus, the real Jesus, in our lives. This January and February, we're going to be jumping into a series called Piece by Piece. And it's all going to be about relationships. Relationships with each other, relationships with our kids, relationships with our communities, relationship with our coworkers, and we're really going to focus on relationships with our spouses, our marriages. And so we're also going to be offering a marriage retreat during this series on February 1st and 2nd. Some of those details are in your bulletin this evening. Because how many of us know relationships are hard? Yeah? Relationships are hard. I want to invite you to give yourself the gift of Jesus. It's the greatest gift you'll ever receive, and it's the greatest gift you'll ever give. And it's the only gift, by the way, you'll give this Christmas that's absolutely free. Give yourself the gift of Jesus. The book of John tells us that Jesus is the light of the world. The light that came into the darkness. We didn't recognize it at first. We haven't always been faithful. And yet this is the light that came for you. And if it was only you, that would have been enough. The thing I love about light is that the more you give it away, you don't lose anything. It just continues to grow. And so I want to demonstrate for you the love of Jesus as we sing Silent Night together and we light one another's candles. So I'm going to invite you to stand, if you would, and if you're able. And I'm just going to kind of come down the center aisle. I'm going to start lighting some candles. And I want to invite you to light some candles with some folks next to you. All right, but let me give you a helpful tip. The candle that's lit stays straight up. The candle that's not lit bends to the side, right? If you do it the other way, you get to wear wax home. So I want you, during this time, I just want to invite you to ask yourself, who is Jesus, the light of the world, to me? And what do I got to do in 2019 to take one step closer to Jesus? Will you sing with us? Friends, it's Christmas, and God has done a miracle in you and through you. So I want to ask you tonight, while you still have your candle lit, what are you thankful for? Will someone just yell something out that you're thankful for tonight? Yeah, keep them coming. I heard my dog over here. Jesus, parents, yes. What else? God, yes. How about way in the back? What are you thankful for back there? Friendship, I heard that. How about over here? Candy, I heard candy. Well, hey, me too. Oh, friends, every day, God is in the miracle business. Christmas is that reminder that no matter how dark things get, God is the light of the world. Jesus sent his son just for you. And I want to remind you that just because we're about to blow out these candles doesn't mean that the light of Christ goes out. What it means is that we get to take the light of Christ into the world. And just like you gave it away tonight, you can give it away in your workplaces and in your homes and in your communities and in your families and even around the world.